Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into the human mind, specifically how we learn and use language. We often think about communication as pretty straightforward, like stacking words together.
Yeah,
But the sources you shared with us suggest, well, that's only half the picture.
exactly. It challenges that linear view quite fundamentally.
So our mission today is to unpack these two really distinct ways the brain processes meaning. Analytic Language Processing, ALP, and Gestalt Language Processing, GLP. We'll be looking back at some pivotal work by Barry Prizant from way back in '83 and trying to understand why one of these pathways, GLP, has kind of been pushed to the side historically.
Yeah, and right off the bat, we need to clear up something important, a confusion that's, well, it's still pretty common. When you talk about GLP, a lot of people immediately think autism.
Right.
But the sources and the current understanding are really pushing for clarity here. Autism is, a whole neurological way of being, sensory processing, social navigation. It's a constellation. GLP is just about how language is acquired, a pathway. Now, do they overlap? Absolutely. The research suggests most autistic people are Gestalt processors, but critically, not all GLPs are autistic. And maybe not even all autistics are GLPs, though that's the dominant pattern.
Okay, that distinction is vital. So GLP isn't a condition, it's a processing route found across different neurotypes.
Exactly, a developmental route.
So we're not just talking about a difference, but maybe a fundamental design feature.
Yeah.
All right, let's break these down then, these two developmental paths. What really defines them? How do they approach language differently right from the get-go?
Well, the sources give us this really helpful analogy. Think staircase versus river.
Staircase versus river,
Okay.
okay. So the Analytic Language Processor, the ALP mind,
Okay.
that's the staircase. Language is built step by step. Segmentation and recombination. Meaning they learn single words first, mama, cup, go. Then they figure out the rules, the grammar, and they apply those rules to stick words together in new ways.
Like building with bricks, carefully placing each one. Precisely. Testing each word, building the structure logically. Comprehension comes from definition and rules.
Okay, that's the staircase. So the Gestalt Language Processor.
That's the river. It's completely different. For them, meaning comes before the individual parts.
Meaning before form. How does that work?
They don't start with the bricks. They absorb the whole building or maybe the whole neighborhood. Language comes in these. The source calls them melodies of meaning, tonal constellations.
Wow, that's poetic.
It is, but it's descriptive. They hear and store language as whole chunks, entire phrases, sentences, sometimes longer scripts. And these chunks, these gestalts, they carry the emotion, the tone, the context of when they were first heard.
So it's not just the words.
Not at all. It's the whole auditory and emotional package. When they hear language, they dive into that river, feeling the flow, the rhythm. They learn the resonance of the language first, long before they start breaking it down into words or grammar.
Okay, wait. If they're learning these whole chunks, these scripts, how do they ever say something new, something original? Doesn't the staircase person, the ALP, have a massive advantage there, starting with the rules?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And that's exactly where understanding stalled for so long. If your only model is the staircase, you see someone using a memorized phrase and you think,
That's not real language, or they're stuck.
exactly. You see it as delayed or disordered. You completely miss the sophisticated internal process happening.
Because it's not just a learning style.
Right. The sources emphasize these are developmental architectures, deep patterns of how the brain works.
One maps and segments, the other inhabits and synthesizes.
That's a good way to put it. And how they get from synthesis to flexible analysis, that brings us to Barry Prizant.
Okay, present. 1983. Let's set the scene. What was the thinking before his paper?
Before Prizant, echolalia, repeating phrases or sounds, was almost universally seen negatively in the context of autism.
It was on the checklist, right? It said deficit, meaningless repetition, something to be stopped.
Absolutely. Non-functional noise. A problem to be fixed.
And Prizant came along and said,
He said, hold on, what if this isn't noise? What if this is communication?
a radical idea back then.
Hugely radical. He refused to frame it as a defect. Instead, he looked at both immediate echolalia, repeating right away, and delayed echolalia, repeating something heard hours or days ago, and proposed it was actually evidence of communicative intelligence, just operating differently.
Intelligence in another key. I like that.
He argued these individuals weren't failing to process language analytically. They were successfully processing it gestaltically.
So he shifted the focus
Yeah.
from what it sounded like.
To why it was being said, the function. And he found it served tons of complex communication needs.
Like what? Give us some examples.
Oh, all sorts. Turn-taking in a conversation, even if the words don't quite fit analytically. Affirmation, like saying yes by echoing part of the question. Rehearsing language internally or externally. Requesting things. Self-commentary. Even expressing emotion or regulating. Calming themselves down.
Okay, so that phrase, "Where are we going today?" repeated later.
Yeah, in the parent's exact tone, Prizant would say, maybe the child isn't asking about today's destination. Maybe they're recalling the feeling of that previous outing, the comfort of the routine. Maybe they're trying to bring that feeling into the present moment.
Wow, okay, so the problem wasn't the utterance.
It was the listener's expectation, the assumption that all valid language has to follow the analytic staircase pattern.
And you mentioned how GLPs develop flexibility.
Huh.
The source talks about gradual unbundling.
Yes. This is crucial. They don't stay stuck with the whole chunks forever. The initial stage is absorbing these whole gestalts.
Forward with all the context.
Exactly, tied to episodic memory, the memory of events. So the gestalt includes the sound, the words, the tone, the feeling, the situation where it was heard. It's all bundled together. Then, the developmental journey for a GLP involves gradually, slowly, taking that whole phrase apart. They start to isolate bits. Maybe they pull out a single word or a smaller phrase from the larger script.
Like taking apart a machine to see how it works.
Sort of. Reverse engineering the symphony, maybe? They hear, look out, the volcano is erupting, as one unit, maybe from a show. Over time, they might isolate look out and use it appropriately. Then maybe swap volcano for something else. Look out, the cat is erupting. Okay, maybe not erupting.
But you see the process.
Right. They figure out is erupting is a verb phrase they can maybe use elsewhere. It's a slow analysis from the whole to the parts.
Which is the complete opposite of the ALP pathway. Whole to part versus part to whole.
Precisely.
So, okay, if this is a valid functional pathway,
All right.
why the historical marginalization? The source gets pretty pointed here, talks about politics.
It does. It frames it as an issue of analytic supremacy.
That sounds intense. What does it mean in this context?
It means our dominant Western institutions think education systems, workplaces, bureaucratic processes, even how we do psychiatric assessments. They're overwhelmingly built to favor and reward analytic thinking, linearity, segmentation, breaking things down into measurable units.
Things that fit neatly into boxes and spreadsheets?
You got it. The analytic mind navigates these systems relatively easily because the systems think like it does.
But the Gestalt mind, thinking in wholes, in context, in patterns,
often gets profoundly misunderstood in those spaces, misread, pathologized even.
Right. You hear about kids whose rich script-based language gets labeled just scripting, as if it's meaningless.
Or their need for predictable routines, which might stem from that deep contextual memory, gets called rigidity or noncompliance.
The source calls this epistemic violence.
Yes, a strong term. But it captures the harm done when one way of knowing systematically dismisses or fails to understand another valid way of knowing. Think about standard school tests. Multiple choice, short answers. They often demand that analytic, decontextualized response. They can penalize a mind that needs the whole picture.
And the source also brings up specific therapeutic approaches. It mentions ABA, applied behavior analysis.
Yes, it points out that some applications of behaviorism, including certain ways ABA is practiced, seem built on this idea that language is just a chain of trained responses.
Seamless response reward.
Right. And from a Gestalt perspective, the source suggests this can feel like unlistening.
Because it ignores the meaning and function embedded in the original Gestalt phrase.
Exactly. It potentially misses the depth, especially the regulatory function. Which brings us to that critical piece, GLP and emotional regulation.
This was a real aha moment for me in the reading.
It's huge. Why that specific phrase? Why that script from a movie? Prizant and researchers since notice these gestalts are so often pulled from emotionally significant moments.
Comforting routines, favorite songs, lines from a movie associated with safety or joy.
Yes. For the GLP, language and feeling, language and effect, are deeply intertwined from the start.
So when they use a Gestalt,
Yeah.
it's not just words, it's like reactivating a feeling.
It can be exactly that. Let's make it concrete. Imagine a child, or even an adult GLP, feeling overwhelmed. Maybe too much noise, too much chaos, internal anxiety rising.
Okay, nervous system starting to panic.
They might suddenly utter a line from, say, a calm cartoon character, a phrase associated with reassurance.
They're not pretending to be the character.
No, They're reaching into their memory bank for the sound and feeling of safety that's encoded in that language chunk. It's an act of self-regulation, an attempt to restore internal coherence by resonating with that known, safe pattern.
So when the source says scripting is not a failure of originality, but an act of self-maintenance.
It's a direct warning. Trying to extinguish that behavior, seeing it only as inappropriate scripting, could actually be dismantling a person's coping mechanism.
You might be taking away their life raft.
That's the risk, yeah.
Wow, okay, this totally reframes the goal then. It's not about forcing the river person onto the staircase?
Absolutely not. The goal isn't replacement, it's expansion.
Nurturing that spiral development.
Right. Honor the early holistic stages where scripts are doing vital work, communication, regulation. Then support the gradual unbundling, the analysis, the recombination, but without losing the original Gestalt foundation.
So the aim is fluency in both, allowing both pathways to work together.
That's the ideal. A flexible system where both ALP and GLP coexist and are accessible. Because you need both, really. The analytic pathway gives you precision, grammar, the ability to construct novel ideas piece by piece.
The details.
And the Gestalt pathway holds the big picture, the context, the emotional nuance, the intuitive pattern recognition, the ineffable stuff.
Put them together, and you get the full human repertoire.
Exactly.
And, thinking about it, this isn't just about kids or clinical settings, is it? We all use Gestalt.
Constantly. Think about adult communication. Shared quotes from movies or books.
Memes. A whole meme is a Gestalt, right? It condenses so much shared understanding and context into one image or phrase.
Totally. Or inside jokes. That shorthand you have with friends or family, where a single word can invoke a whole shared history or feeling.
We're reaching for that comfort of the whole. It's efficient. It connects.
And notice when we do it most often under stress, or when we need to convey something complex quickly, even highly analytic people might revert to a familiar quote or a saying.
We don't always stop to build the perfect sentence from scratch. We grab the resonant chunk.
Right. So this insight, it really does challenge some deep assumptions in education, in therapy, maybe even in policy. If cognition isn't singular, if language can be built whole apart,
then truth cannot be singular, as the source puts it. We have to value the melody as much as the logic.
we have to learn to listen for both.
Okay, let's do a quick recap of this deep dive. We started by defining the two pathways, ALP the staircase and GLP the river, making clear GLP is a valid developmental route.
Then we looked at Barry Prizant's groundbreaking work in '83, how he reframed echolalia not as deficit, but as functional communication, often serving regulatory needs.
We talked about how that regulation works, pulling emotionally resonant language chunks from memory.
And we touched on why GLP gets marginalized, this idea of analytic supremacy in our systems, which can misunderstand and even harm Gestalt thinkers.
Leading to the understanding that the goal isn't replacement, but integration, honoring both ways of knowing.
Absolutely. And the final takeaway from the source material is really that call to action. Let's stop trying to force everyone onto the analytic staircase. Let's honor these multiple ways of processing language as equally human, equally valuable for real connection, because connection relies on that resonance, not just perfect grammar.
Which leaves you, our listener, with something to maybe mull over. If connection truly relies on Gestalt, on tuning into pattern, tone, context, the whole melody, what unspoken gestalts are you using today to connect, to self-regulate? And perhaps more importantly, are you truly listening for the melody beneath the words when others speak? Are you catching their gestalts?